Want to know how to calculate a realistic project budget before you even start? Well, most budgets blow out, but it doesn't have to be that way for your building project. So you've saved up some money for that perfect home reno or new build. And after doing some research, you think that your money can get you something that looks like this. But if you don't calculate your budget correctly, it could end up looking much more like this. Why? Because most property owners are not aware of all the costs that go into building, and they are not small sums of money, all which commonly result in a misalignment between expectation and budget. I'm Laszlo Baranyay, a registered architect, and welcome to the LB Architects podcast. I'm joined by my wife and fellow architect director, Fanny Laruelle, and together, our mission is to make the world of design and construction clear, accessible, and empowering, so you can build with confidence. So by the end of the video, you'll learn how to create a more realistic initial budget for your project, even before a line's been drawn. We'll do this by showing you the hidden costs of building that catches even the most discerning property owners off guard. You'll learn how to create your own initial budget for your project using our DIY budget estimator. It's one that we use for our own projects. It's easy to use and no design experience is needed. We'll show you a step-by-step example of exactly how it works to help you align your budget with your project needs. And we'll also discuss the risks of all-inclusive design and build projects, along with other architect essential tips to save you big money and headaches for your project. So let's go.
Okay, let's go.
I guess what we'll want to do is break down what actually goes into a budget initially.
Yeah.
And I think that might surprise people in terms of what actually goes into it and how much is actually correlated with the building and other elements. So when we talk about project budget, most people think that there's a build bucket. So if you imagine there's a bucket full of costs associated with your project, people think there's one bucket, build bucket, put the money in, and out comes your project. And that accounts for everything. But what actually happens is there's two main buckets. So there's the build bucket, which is the construction costs. And then there's the pre-build bucket, which is everything that happens before your builder gets to site and starts building. So the build bucket, as I said, that's the construction cost. So that's everything that goes into the build itself.
So that's basically the number you would have on a construction contract. So once let's say you've got your drawings done, you give that to your builder and your builder is going to price your project.
Yeah.
So that's the construction. It's going to be labor, it's going to be materials, it's going to be install, all of the things that actually you see on site and get built. So that's the construction cost or cost of works, basically.
The cost of works, yeah. So yeah, builders quote, labor, materials, subcontractors, and on-site work. That's all contained within that bucket of cost. But then the pre-build bucket, that's considered the design, permits, and regulatory costs. So that's everything that gets the project ready for construction. And you can imagine that there is a significant amount of time and a significant amount of resources that goes into that portion of the process that is typically unaccounted for when people think of a building project. And so that includes things like professional fees, so design and engineering type of services, as well as any experts that are required for your specific project. Then you got authority and council fees. They add up quite quickly. Then you need an allowance for a contingency amount. So a contingency is an amount of money set aside in case of any unforeseen circumstances arise for your project. Escalation, which is a big one. So that's to do with building prices that continually go up over time. And obviously we've seen a lot of that recently. So you got to allow for that because you're not going to get onto site until potentially 6 to 12 months down the line. So you got to account for that increase in build cost upfront. And then of course taxes. If you got $1 million budget and you allow 10% for a goods and services tax, well, it's already down to 900 grand before you even start. So, but basically the pre-build bucket plus the build bucket, when you add those two together, that creates your total project cost or your project budget. Allowing for both those two building costs buckets is critical to getting your initial project budget close enough that you can then continue the process with confidence and then talk to your design and build professionals. And then as you add more detail in to the project, well, then you can narrow down your budget even further. So the idea is you start out wide, you have more of a range, and then you can work your way down. But you don't want to be starting with a budget of $300,000 and then all of a sudden 3 months, 6 months down the line, it increases to $5,000, $600,000. You don't want that. You want it to start with the 300 to 500 range and you narrow it down to 400.
So the idea is you start with expectation here, and then across the development of your project, unfortunately, your expectation comes down here. What you want to do is you start with your expectation here, and across your project, you actually raise your expectation here. So now the question is, how do you achieve this? And as you were saying, it's by starting with a ballpark figure and then understanding how do you maximize your budget, in which way you make the most of it. Because let's say you have that expectation that is here and you want to achieve that beautiful home that you are dreaming about. It doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means that you need to be quite strategic in the way you approach that budget. And perhaps you really, really want that beautiful kitchen that you're dreaming about. In that case, you splurge on that. And then you are strategic in where you spend, what you specify in the rest of the house. Or there are ways. And that's just about understanding and anticipating. So first, obviously, understand what's inside your budget, and as you progress through your project, you'll be able to then act and then maximize that.
We put together a project budget formula. So it's a 3-step process, and it all starts with understanding what goes into the build bucket first, and then you can calculate the pre-build costs at a percentage rate. And then from that, you just add the build cost plus the pre-build cost to create your total project budget. So it's a really simple 3-step formula. There's not much math involved. If you're looking for extra tools to get your project off the ground the right way, make sure to check out our project launch kit. It includes 10 architect essential resources, plus some amazing bonuses to help you plan with confidence and clarity. You'll find the link in the show notes below, or you can visit our website for all the details. So if we start with the build bucket, what goes into that? So it's the total building area, so building work area, multiply that by a typical build square meter rate.
When you haven't drawn anything, you have no idea how big it is.
Yeah.
How do you even know what's the square meter of your project?
You've worked out that you want a new master bedroom, a new ensuite, a new dining room, and a kitchen. Now you can use typical areas associated with those different spaces to create a total building area to start. So let's say a new master bedroom is roughly 25 square meters. Fairly generous, but good size. Then with a bathroom, say 10 square meters, plus the dining 15, plus the kitchen 20. So overall, in terms of your total building area, you got around 70 square meters. So we've put together a list of areas associated with each space. If you would like that list, feel free to DM us and we'll send it to you straight away. So let's say you got total 70 square meters. So now we've got a scope. Then all we do is we multiply that by a typical square meter rate. Let's say in this example, we allow for $3,500 per square meter. This is just an example that we're giving you. What applies to your location will be different. So if you need more guidance on that, there's plenty of resources online. You can definitely find out some typical square meter rates that relate to your location and your project type.
And you can inquire around you because, a lot of people are building or at least doing a reno, so they may have some ballpark that they've used for themselves, or you can ask a professional if you just have just interview with them just to give you rough ideas. You'll find that very often professionals are a bit hesitant because obviously the first number someone is going to give you is the number you're going to remember. And obviously they don't want to influence you in the wrong way. They don't want to make a mistake in telling you it's going to cost this, and it's actually not what your project is. So it's such project specific that, some professional may be reluctant in telling you or giving you those information, but if you just ask around, I'm sure you'll find the information.
An architect, or interior designer, a drafty, they're not going to be able to quote your job to build. They can work from their experience in terms of what they've worked on and the total costs that have occurred on previous projects to give you that ballpark figure. If in doubt, go and speak to a professional builder. Let them provide you with a square meter rate that you're comfortable with, or at least a range to start with. So all we do is we use our 70 square meters build area, multiply that by the square meter rate, $3,500. That gives us an indicative construction cost of $250K, let's say, round figures. All right, so that's your build bucket, 250 grand.
So that's the cost you're going to spend when the builders start on site and start
on the build itself.
On the build itself, right, yeah. Yeah, the construction.
So the materials, the labor, and the like that we mentioned before. So then from that, we can then use that figure, 250K from build bucket, and we use that to then give us an understanding of the pre-build costs. So the pre-build costs, that's the pre-build items, multiply that by a percentage of the build cost.
So basically, the way we work out the pre-build cost is against each item that is likely to be part of that pre-build cost, we allocate a percentage. And that percentage applies to the construction cost you've just calculated. So let's say GST, 10%, that percentage.
Yep.
What are the others?
2 to 4% for council fees, design fees of around 10 to 20%, escalation of 3 to 4%. That could be a little bit higher, particularly nowadays. Contingency 5 to 10%. 10% is probably a good starting point. So we allow for those sorts of percentages. And if there are any other specific allowances that you would know about for your project, you'd add them to the list. But in that case, so we've got tax, council fees, design fees, escalation, and contingencies. So this is what most projects would include, but it's not an exhaustive list. There might be a number of other items that need to be added to your list for your specific project, depending on what it is and what you're trying to achieve. But to get you started, these are some of the big ticket ones that we commonly see. If we add up all those figures that we just talked about, it adds up to around 110 grand in this example. To get your project budget, you add your build bucket plus your pre-build bucket, 250 plus 110, that's around 360 grand plus, around that figure for your total project cost. So in this example here, the pre-build bucket adds up to around 30% of the total cost.
Can be less, can be more.
Can be less, can be more.
Yeah.
But roughly speaking, 30% is a pretty good starting point for around that price point anyway.
Yeah.
And then you can use that same ratio, use that same 30% and say you've got $1 million project. So let's say you've allowed $1 million in terms of your total project budget. What's 30% of that? Well, 300 grand.
Yeah.
So 300 grand roughly could go into the pre-build bucket.
For a $1 million house, I would definitely say you probably end up on site with a 600 to definitely 700 budget to build.
Of build cost.
Yeah, of build cost.
Well, if you just think about it, 10% taxes already brings it down to 900 grand.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's either your 1 million can go up to 1.3 million, or your 1 million is your max, and then your on-site cost will be 600 to 700.
Yes, and I think this is where the big discrepancy comes in terms of expectation and what people get for their budget.
That's right.
Right? They think they're paying $1 million and they're getting $1 million house. Well, no, you're not getting $1 million house. You're getting a $700,000 house.
Comes down to then, once you know that, and if you know you can't go higher than that, it's your max, then it's fine.
It's fine.
It's totally fine. You try to be clever about it.
Yeah.
And you talk to your professional about it. How do you maximize? Because you really want this. So, and that's when you want to plan it properly.
But once you know, well, then your expectation will meet the end result.
That's right.
Rather than the other way around.
Yeah. So basically, this would give you a ballpark figure before anything is drawn, before you've talked to almost anyone. You can actually quickly understand, okay, is this covering what I need? Yes, no.
Yeah. It can save you a lot of time
Yes.
just by doing that very quick exercise.
Yeah.
And a lot of hassle down the line just by doing that. I think the most important thing from this example of being able to do it yourself is that you can go to them and you can lead the discussion in terms of your priorities. You give them a list of the spaces you want. You give them the approximate square meters you've allowed for, and then you put together a figure and you can discuss that with them, right? So they can then inform you further. You can prompt them to give you this critical information.
When we have clients coming to us and they really don't know what their budget is like, so what we ask them is, okay, what is on your dream list for your project? What's on your dream list? So basically they're going to say everything they would love to have on their project. And we go, okay, let's start there. And we start there and we start mapping out the cost of all of that. We put a number next to it. And it's like, oh yeah, that looks great. We can get all of it. Or the answer is, ooh, that's actually a little bit too high. And then we go back to the dream list and we're like, okay, from that dream list, what are the items that you're willing to compromise on?
Yeah, you put together a priority list.
That's exactly right. And then from that, you work it out. So by doing this, you also allow your professional to deliver a better work, because then they can actually focus on what you can afford, but they also focus on a scope that is more realistic. So you're not wasting time, you're not going to have abortive work, and you're not waiting to reach tender phase or builder negotiation phase to then have their price and realizing actually the design is actually completely far off from what I allowed for.
Once you have an idea on what you want, after you've done the site strategy for your project, you really need to clearly define your scope, and then that will then enable you to have a ballpark figure that has a lot more accuracy to it and that you can have some confidence behind.
And then you design according to that ballpark figure.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing with all-inclusive packages, I think now that we've done that exercise of going through a project budget, if they say all-inclusive cost for that build is 400 grand, let's say, well, you know, if you apply, let's say in this case, a 30% ratio to that, 120 grand will be going into the pre-build bucket. So that's around 280 grand of actual building costs. So now you at least know that fact. Whether it matters or not to you, at the end of the day, you just want that house built that way, fine. But at least you now know where your money is going. Some of the other elements that aren't included in all-inclusive packages are anything that's around the house itself. So sometimes they don't include landscaping, they don't include site works and the like, and that can be a significant amount of money too.
And that's something, once again, you can clarify at the beginning. When you start interviewing people and you are unsure who would be the right fit, all of that could be the question you ask them to make sure you do not have a surprise. Because sometimes we have people coming to us when their home is built and they're like, we have that massive hole on the side of our house and we don't know what to do about it. Because, for example, site has been excavated a certain way or filled a certain way. And then they ask us, well, what can we do to fix that?
Yep.
So
no, exactly.
It can be an issue as well.
A tip in all this, if you were to go down the route of all-inclusive home builder path, is you can still ask for a trade breakdown. See if they do provide you one, or see if they give you any sort of information on where the costs are going. At the bare minimum, you should ask for a split between the pre-build and the build costs.
Yeah.
So you know how much time is actually going into the design process.
It's not necessarily just the design, I would say, because what about planning? Sure, they may work from pre-done templates, but planning would still need to happen. So you'd still have to pay for the planning fees. You'd still have a GST that apply. You may still want a contingency to apply on your project because your site is not, even though it's the same house that they build on Rickett, the site is dramatically different. There are different conditions to it. So if they just say to you, oh, the design in the pre-built song is a design, I would say there's definitely more than design. And you can start questioning, okay, what about planning? What about tax? What about contingency? What about escalation?
Doing approval.
Exactly.
It all needs to happen, which is outside.
It has to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
It has to happen no matter what journey or what delivery method, what path you choose.
When everything is above board, right, and the costs are transparent, then the risk of being taken for a ride is reduced.
And I think the bottom line here is transparency, as you're saying, and is just going in with your eyes open, isn't it? And prompting questions. Despite the fact that, of course, you're not an expert and no one expects you to be one. It's leading also to finding the right team for you, because depending on your budget, depending on what you're after, then you can differentiate the professionals and know, okay, actually that person would be probably better to deliver what I'm after.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you're looking for extra tools to get your project off the ground the right way, make sure to check out our project launch kit. It includes 10 architect essential resources, plus some amazing bonuses to help you plan with confidence and clarity. It includes the project cost calculator that we showed you earlier. You'll find the link in the show notes below, or you can visit our website for all the details. If you've got any questions or you want more information about budgets or other topics for your build, drop a comment below or DM us on the socials. We'd love to hear from you. All the best for your project and see you again soon.